There are 3 men in this cabinet card from the Comstock load, and only 2 of them were supposed to be there. The print is dated 1873. It shows the Yellow Jacket mine outside Virginia City, a foreman and a mucker on either side of a Cornish pump, and a brass safety lamp on a stake by the entrance. The 3rd man is in the polished base of the lamp, low and crooked, holding a camera under a black cloth. That is not the strange part. The strange part is the hat on his head. It is the hat of a Methodist circuit-riding preacher. On a day he was supposed to be 15 miles south, preparing a Wednesday evening service for a woman named Eliza, who, 6 weeks earlier, had walked out of his parsonage and not come back. The cabinet card is 3 1/4 by 4 1/2 inches, mounted on a buff-colored board that has gone foxy at 3 corners. The studio mark on the verso is faint but readable. J. Carpenter, Virginia City, Nevada, 1873. Foreman in the foreground, hand on hip. Mucker behind, blackened to the wrists. Both men awkward in the way wet plate sitters were always awkward, holding still for the 8 or 9 seconds the exposure asked of them. A working photograph on a first reading. A working photograph from the Comstock at the end of the silver boom, made to be hung in the company office in San Francisco. A second reading is what we are here for. Look at the lamp. A safety lamp in 1873 on the Comstock is a brass cylinder about 10 inches tall, with a gauze cap and a polished base that the miners called the bell. It was meant to be polished daily because the brass under a tallow flame fogs in a single shift, and a fogged lamp gives a false reading on gas. The bell on this lamp is polished to the point that the photograph has caught what was standing across from it, on the other side of the pump housing. The brass is acting as a mirror, low and crooked, and the silver in the collodion is sharp enough that the small reflection survives 153 years. In the reflection, there is the 3rd man, a man with a camera under a black cloth, the photographer. That alone is not strange. Photographers in the wet plate years often appeared in their own brass and tin and silver, in the polished side of a coffee pot at a dining room sitting, in the curve of a sextant on a sea portrait, in the lens of a marshal's pocket watch held up for an evidence photograph. The brass mirror was the period's accidental self-portrait, and most studio photographers got tired of seeing themselves on their own glass and learned to stand at an angle. Carpenter did not stand at an angle that day at the Yellow Jacket. He stood straight on, and the hat on his head, in the reflection in the brass safety lamp, is not the hat any studio man on the Comstock wore in 1873. It is a low-crowned, soft felt with a wide band, and the band carries a plain, dark ribbon tied off on the left side. That ribbon is not a studio man's ribbon. It is not a foreman's ribbon. It is not the Cornishman's flat cap that almost every working man on Mount Davidson wore underground. It is the band of a circuit-riding Methodist preacher on the Nevada district, the same band that turns up in 2 other photographs from the Story County church rolls of those years. I should say, plainly, that I came to this print because of the ribbon. I was looking for something else, a photograph of the Belcher hoist works for an unrelated piece on Cornish engineering. And I came to the Yellow Jacket card by way of a folder mislabeled at the Nevada Historical Society in Reno. I opened it. I saw the brass. I saw what was in the brass, and I have been looking at the man under that hat ever since. Names in this story are changed where families requested. The photograph and its provenance are as I described them. The cabinet card itself is digital reproduction. Nevada Historical Society Catalog Card 741/1873. The original sits behind glass in their archive on North Virginia Street. I have held it under cotton gloves once. I will probably not be allowed to hold it again because I asked too many questions afterwards about where it came from. What I want to do tonight is reconstruct, with what the Comstock Church rolls and the territorial enterprise and a few personal letters allow, who Carpenter the photographer was, why a Methodist circuit rider was making cabinet cards of mining concerns in 1873, and what he was doing on the slope of Mount Davidson on the morning that print was struck. The yellow jacket itself sat below the line of the Big Bonanza, on the eastern face. By 1873, the surface levels were largely worked out, and the company was driving deeper toward the 1,800-foot level, where the heat would later kill men in shifts of 40 minutes. The mine had burned in April of '69, killing more than 30 miners, and the rebuild was finished by the autumn of '71. By the spring of '73, when Carpenter set up his tripod outside the entrance, the Yellow Jacket was paying about $3.50 for a married mucker's shift and $4 for a single man on the night drift. A studio cabinet card in C Street in Virginia City cost $4.25 the same year. A working man could spend a shift to be photographed. Many did. The territorial enterprise that April carried 6 advertisements from C Street studios competing for that money. Carpenter was not in C Street. Carpenter, as far as I can tell from the licensing list at the Story County Clerk's office, had no studio at all. He had a wagon. He had plates and a portable darkroom tent, and a brass-bound camera with a Voigtländer lens that the Wells Fargo manifest at Reno later listed as second-hand. He worked the mines, the way other men worked the saloons or the cribs, going to where the money came out at the end of the week, before it got spent in town. That was unusual, but not strange. What is strange is that the Story County licensing list, the same list that registered every studio photographer in Virginia City from 1864 to 1881, does not have Carpenter on it. Not in 1872, not in 1873, not in any year. He never paid the license fee. He never registered his camera. He worked the slope of Mount Davidson for at least 2 years without standing in front of the county clerk and giving his name to the photograph trade. The man in the brass lamp at the Yellow Jacket was not, in any official sense, a photographer at all. I went looking for him under his other hat. The Nevada district of the Methodist Episcopal Church kept its circuit rider rolls in a leather-bound minute book at the Story County Church on Taylor Street. The book covers 1869 through 1882 and lists 31 preachers under appointment in that period, by name, district, and approximate stipend. Stipends ranged from $180 a year for a first appointment man on the smallest circuit, the Truckee Meadows, to $420 for the senior man on the Virginia City circuit itself. 3 preachers on that roll have their middle names abbreviated to the letter J. 2 of them are named in the territorial enterprise in the spring of '73 as having preached funerals at the Yellow Jacket after a small cave-in killed 2 men in March. The third one is not in the newspaper at all. His name in the minute book is Jonathan Carpenter, appointed in October of 1871 to the Carson Valley Circuit, with a stipend of $240 a year. He preached, by the minute book's reckoning, at 5 small congregations between Genoa and Virginia City, on a 4-week rotation. The minute book lists him as released from appointment in November of 1874, with the standard formula, by his own request, for reasons of health. And then he disappears from the record. $240 a year, a circuit rider's horse and bridle, a cracked Voigtländer lens on the Wells Fargo manifest at Reno, second-hand, $28 and a quarter. The arithmetic is what made me sit up. 240 divided by 12 is $20 a month. 2 cabinet cards a month at 4 and a quarter each would have almost doubled that. And the rolls of the Nevada district show that the preachers on the smaller circuits routinely supplemented their stipends by teaching school, by clerking at the courthouse on appointment days, by farming on the strips along the Carson River. What none of the rolls show, what no minute book in the Methodist Episcopal Archive west of Salt Lake mentions in any year between 1869 and 1880, is a circuit rider supplementing his stipend by making portraits. The trade was considered worldly. The General Conference of those years had, by the disciplined books I have read, discouraged participation by clergy in the photograph trade, citing the vanity of the sitter and the worldly profit of the maker. Jonathan Carpenter, in the spring of 1873, was standing outside the Yellow Jacket mine on a Tuesday morning, 15 miles from the Carson Valley Church, where he was supposed to be preparing the Wednesday evening service, with a wagon and a tent and a second-hand Voigtländer lens, making a $4 and a quarter cabinet card of 2 miners and a Cornish pump. And he had forgotten to angle himself away from the brass. Virginia City, in the late spring of 1873, was a town past its loudest year, and not yet at its richest. The big bonanza, the deep silver body that would make Mackay and Fair and Flood into Comstock millionaires, was beginning to show on the lower levels of the consolidated Virginia that spring, though its full extent would not become public for another year and a half. The streets that May still ran 4 newspapers, 6 churches, 60-odd saloons, and 1 hospital. The Story County census of 1870 had counted just over 11,000 souls in the town and its adjacent diggings. By the spring of 73, the unofficial count, kept by the city marshal's office for the polling lists, was nearer 15,000 and rising fast. The town held its working hours by mine whistles. Crown Point at 6, Belcher at 6 and a quarter, Yellow Jacket at 6 and a half, Savage at 7. Wives on B Street and C Street learned to set bread by the Yellow Jacket whistle, because it was loudest. The Daily Territorial Enterprise, Dan DeQuille still on the local desk, Mark Twain, 9 years gone east, went to press at 11 in the evening for the morning edition. And on the 18th of May, 1873, the paper that hit C Street the next morning carried, on the second column of page 3, a small notice from the Methodist Episcopal Church on Taylor Street. The notice was 62 words long. It announced that the Wednesday evening service at the Carson Valley Church at Genoa would be cancelled, the appointed minister being detained on church business in the north of the district. The notice was placed by the Reverend Dr. McGee, presiding elder of the Nevada district. The wording is gentle and routine. Detained on church business. In the north of the district. The signature carries no annotation. The notice ran once, on the morning of the 19th of May, and was not repeated. I read this notice as a kind of letter from one tired man to another. McGee, the presiding elder, was a Cornish-born Methodist of 53 years, with 3 circuit riders under him in the south and 2 more north of Carson. He had been told, perhaps that evening, perhaps the night before, that one of his men had not arrived at the Wednesday evening preparation, and was very probably not going to. McGee did what a presiding elder did in 1873. He covered for the missing man. He placed a small notice in the morning paper. He wrote a single, careful line in the minute book under the May entries. J. Carpenter, detained, North District. And he kept the matter to himself. 2 days later, McGee took the morning Reno stage up to Virginia City and called at the door of the Story County Church on Taylor Street. The minute book of the Story County Church does not record this visit, because the visit was not Story County Church business. The Reno, Virginia stage manifest at the Wells Fargo Reno office, however, records a Reverend T. McGee on the morning run of the 21st of May, returning the afternoon of the 23rd. 2.5 days in Virginia City. The Daily Territorial Enterprise of the 23rd of May, on page 4, lists a Reverend McGee among the dozen guests of the International Hotel for the night of the 22nd. There is no other reason a presiding elder of the Nevada District would have spent 2.5 days at the International Hotel in Virginia City in May of 1873. McGee was looking for Carpenter. He was, by the look of the rolls, looking very quietly. Methodist district practice in those years was that an unexplained absence by a circuit rider on a small stipend was first noted, then assumed to be an illness, then quietly absorbed by the surrounding ministers, then, if it ran past the second Sabbath, taken to the bishop. McGee did not write to the bishop. McGee took the Reno stage himself, slept 2 nights at the International, and went home. There is no written record of what he learned. There is, however, a strange, small thing in the minute book that follows. For the appointments dated June of 1873, McGee wrote out the assignments for all his circuit riders in his usual careful copperplate. Carpenter's name is there. Carson Valley Circuit, 4-week rotation, same 5 congregations. The stipend line, which up to and including May reads $240 per annum, paid quarterly through the district treasurer, reads in the June entry $240 per annum, paid quarterly through the presiding elder. Through the presiding elder. McGee had taken Carpenter's pay onto his own books. For the rest of 1873, and through the first 9 months of 1874, the Carson Valley stipend ran through McGee personally and not through the district treasurer at Sacramento. There is no surviving correspondence explaining the change. The district treasurer's ledger at the Pacific Methodist Depository in Stockton notes the change without comment. A small accounting move, a presiding elder taking a circuit rider's pay onto his own hand. There is exactly one reason in 1873 Methodist practice for that arrangement. A man whose receipt of his stipend is, for whatever reason, not entirely simple. A man whose mail is going somewhere other than where the district treasurer thinks it is. A man who, for the convenience of the church and the protection of his appointment, needs his pay walked over to him by hand 4 times a year. McGee, in other words, had found Carpenter, had decided what to do about him, and had decided to do nothing visible. He had a man under appointment who was working another trade. He could have removed him from the rolls. He did not. He could have written to the bishop. He did not. He took the pay onto his own books, walked it down to Carson Valley 4 times a year, and let Carpenter ride the circuit and make his cabinet cards on the side. I would like to be able to tell you why McGee made that choice. I cannot. The McGee papers in the Pacific School of Religion archive at Berkeley run to 4 boxes, and not one of them touches on this matter. McGee's surviving letters from the spring and summer of '73 are mostly about the rebuilding of the Carson City pulpit and the failure of a kerosene stove at the parsonage at Genoa. He does not mention Carpenter. He does not mention the photograph trade. He does not, anywhere in his papers, mention the Yellow Jacket mine. He may have known the man. The Methodist Episcopal Church in Nevada in 1871 was a small body, not more than 250 regular members across the whole district. And McGee, who had been a presiding elder since '68, would have known most of his circuit riders personally, and would have known when one of them was about to slip. He may have heard a confession at the Wednesday evening preparation that he was supposed to be at in Genoa, the very service his notice in the Enterprise had cancelled. He may have made his bargain with Carpenter at that evening's service in the Carson Valley Chapel. If you will not give up the wagon, at least let me keep the books for you, and let us not speak of this again. That is my reading. I am not certain. The only source I have on this is the change in the stipend column and the 2 days at the International Hotel. Biographers disagree by 2 years on what the McGee-Carpenter relationship even was, and I am working at the edge of what the minute book and the stage manifest can tell me. I have stood at the door of the Genoa Chapel where the Wednesday evening preparation would have been held. The building is still there, weatherboarded, painted white. The original cast-iron stove from the 1869 parsonage, now in the entrance vestibule as a kind of memorial. The pulpit is gone. The minute book is in Stockton. What I am certain of, because the photograph itself is certain of it, is that Carpenter went on with the wagon. The Yellow Jacket cabinet card is dated 1873 by the studio mark on the verso. It is not the only one. The Nevada Historical Society catalog lists 9 cabinet cards under the J. Carpenter, Virginia City mark, dated between 1872 and 1874. 5 of them are of mining concerns: Yellow Jacket, Crown Point, Belcher, the Sutro Tunnel Works at Sutro on the Carson River Plain, and the small Pelican Stamp Mill at Devil's Gate. 2 are of railroad construction on the Virginia and Truckee line. 1 is of a Story County jury posed on the courthouse steps. 1 is of a Chinese merchant family in the building at the foot of A Street. In 4 of the 9, if you look hard at a polished surface, Carpenter is in the frame. A brass lamp at the Yellow Jacket. A coffee urn at the courthouse jury sitting. The cast-iron face of a hand pump at the Crown Point. And, in the Chinese family portrait at the foot of A Street, in a small lacquered tray set on a low table to the right of the youngest child, a single eye and the edge of a hat brim. That is what makes the Yellow Jacket print not a curiosity, but a question. Carpenter was not casual about his work. He was deliberate. The portable darkroom tent, the Voigtländer lens, the angle he chose for each plate. These are the work of a man who knew what he was doing. And in 4 of his 9 surviving prints, he allowed himself to be photographed. Not a vanity, not an accident, a pattern. I went down to Stockton in the autumn of 2004 with a county museum letter in my coat pocket to see the McGee Minute Book and the Pacific Methodist District Treasurer's ledger. The archive sits in the basement of a small Methodist depository on Center Street. The archivist that morning was a woman in her 60s who had been a Sunday school librarian for 40 years before she took the post. She brought the minute book and the treasurer's ledger up in a cotton-lined box and set them on a reading table by the window. I had come for the change in the stipend column. I found it. 3 lines of careful copperplate, McGee's own hand, the change from through the district treasurer to through the presiding elder, exactly where my notes said it would be. I sat for a long time with that page open, listening to the radiator click. Then I turned the page. The June 1,873 entries for the other circuit riders carry the standard formula. The July entries the same. The August entries the same. And then, in September, in the column reserved for marginal annotations in the minute book, a column that the standard practice almost never used, McGee had written in pencil 3 words. The pencil is faint, but the words are legible. They read, Eliza, by post. Eliza Carpenter is in the Story County Church baptismal register for the 18th of October, 1872, as the witness at the baptism of an infant girl, Sarah Caroline, daughter of Thomas and Margaret Hanrahan of Gold Hill. She is named in the register as Eliza Carpenter, wife of the Reverend J. Carpenter of Genoa. She is in the Carson Valley Parish Book the same year as having held the Wednesday school class for the children of Mormon Station. She is in the marriage register of the Methodist Episcopal Church at Marysville, California, for the 2nd of June, 1869, as the bride of Jonathan Carpenter, then a probationer of the same district, then 23 years old. She had been 21 when she married him. Eliza, by post. This is the line that, in my reading, makes the whole story turn. The arithmetic from the first part, 240 a year, 20 a month, a cabinet card every 2 weeks, bringing in another 4 1/4, is not enough arithmetic. Not nearly. A circuit rider in the Nevada district in 1873, with a wife on the Carson Valley Circuit, had room and board provided at the parsonage and a small annual allowance for clothing and travel. He did not have the spare income for a portable darkroom tent and a Voigtländer lens and a wagon, and the chemistry to develop 2 cabinet cards a week. The arithmetic adds up only if Carpenter was running the wagon hard, and Carpenter was running the wagon hard only if he was paying for something besides the wagon. Eliza Carpenter is in the Marysville marriage register at 21 years old, in the Carson Valley Parish Book at 23, in the Story County Baptismal Register at 24, and then, in the autumn of 1873, in the place where her name should next appear in a record, she is not there. The Carson Valley Parish Book lists no Wednesday school class for the year 1874. The Story County Baptismal Register has no Eliza Carpenter as witness between October of 1873 and the end of the McGee Minute Book in 1882. She is not in the Mountain Democrat at Placerville. She is not in the Daily Outer California at San Francisco. She is not in the Territorial Methodist marriage or burial registers. She is in a single line of pencil in the marginal column of the McGee Minute Book. Eliza, by post. What McGee meant, I think, is that Eliza was being paid by post. Carpenter's stipend, walked over 4 times a year by the presiding elder, was being divided. Some part of it was going to wherever Eliza was. Wherever Eliza was, it was not Genoa. I have one source for this, and one only, and I want to give it to you honestly. The Wells Fargo Express office at Reno kept its outgoing mail manifest for 1873 and 1874 in a leather-bound book that was preserved when the office burned in 1879. The book lists postal orders by sender's name and destination city. There are 7 postal orders sent in those 2 years, from a McGee T. Carson City to a Carpenter E. at a hotel in Sacramento. $40 each, quarterly. The last one is dated September of 1874. $40 a quarter to a hotel in Sacramento is not enough to live on. It is enough to keep a room. I went to Sacramento in the summer of 2005. The hotel named on the Wells Fargo manifest was the Westin on K Street between 2nd and 3rd. The building burned in January of 1875, and the records went with it. A second Westin hotel was put up on the same lot the same summer, but it was not the same house, and it kept no register of the first place's transients. The Sacramento Bee for the autumn of 1874 carries no notice of an Eliza Carpenter. The Sacramento Parish records of the Methodist Episcopal Church in that year carry no Eliza Carpenter. The Sacramento City Directory of 1875 carries no Eliza Carpenter. She is at the Westin Hotel by postal order for the better part of 2 years, and she leaves no other trace. The family tradition has it, and I am here on family tradition only, given to me by a great-great-niece in Reno in 2007, an old woman who had a folder of letters and a tintype, that Eliza had walked out of the Genoa parsonage in March of 1873, 6 weeks before the Yellow Jacket cabinet card was struck. The reason given by the family was that the parsonage was lonely, and that Eliza had been raised in Marysville in a household with 5 sisters, and could not abide the silence. I am not sure the reason given is the full reason. The great-great-niece said her own grandmother had spoken of the other thing, but had not said what the other thing was. I did not press. The great-great-niece died in 2009. The folder of letters and the tintype, by her instructions, were destroyed. What I have then is the shape of a marriage that ran sideways. A young preacher on a small circuit. A young wife who left. A presiding elder who covered for both of them and walked the quarterly stipend down to Carson Valley 4 times a year and posted the other half to a hotel in Sacramento. And a wagon. And the Voigtländer lens. And the 4 1/4 cabinet cards of the Yellow Jacket and the Crown Point and the Belcher and the V&T construction sites. He was, I think, paying for the postal orders. He was, I think, sending Eliza what he could not bring her himself. There is one thing more, and it is the thing that brought me back to the cabinet card. In 2011, I was given permission to examine, under the supervision of a conservator at the Nevada Historical Society, the verso of the Yellow Jacket print. The buff board carries the studio mark in iron gall ink. Behind the studio mark, set into the board under what is called a backing layer, the conservator found a thin sheet of writing paper, folded twice. The paper had been there since the print was originally mounted. It carries, in pencil, in a hand, the conservator and I both believe is Carpenter's own. 4 words. The words are, for E, when found. The cabinet card is not a commercial photograph. It is not a working print made for the company office in San Francisco. It is a letter, addressed to a wife who had left, hidden inside the only thing the man who made it knew how to make. He was leaving cabinet cards across the Comstock, with himself reflected in brass and tin and silver. He was not signing his name on the front. He was signing it in the only way a man whose name was on a minute book and a marriage register and a baptismal record could sign himself when he did not want anyone but his wife to know where he had been that day. I had been looking at the yellow jacket print for 7 years before I understood that. When I tell this story at a small county museum lecture, which is the only place I tell it, I have a habit of stopping at this point and asking the audience whether they have any questions. They almost never do. They sit very still. After a moment, one of them, usually a woman in the back row, asks the same question, in a slightly different form each time. The question is, did Eliza ever see the cabinet card? I do not know. The Westin Hotel burned in 1875. The Carpenter family tradition does not say. The McGee papers at Berkeley do not say. The conservator at the Nevada Historical Society and I have agreed, between us, not to remove the backing layer further than we have already removed it, because the paper is brittle, and because, whether or not Eliza ever saw the print is now a letter, and a letter is not for the conservator to read aloud. The woman in the back row almost always nods at that and goes quiet. Carpenter was released from appointment in November of 1874 by his own request for reasons of health. The minute book formula. I have looked for him in the rolls of the surrounding districts for the years 1875, 1876, and 1877. He is not in the California-Nevada Conference. He is not in the Oregon District. He is not in the Pacific Methodist Mission rolls for Utah or for the Arizona Territory. He stops being a circuit rider in November of 1874, and the standard practice of the Methodist Episcopal Church in those years was that a man who was released for reasons of health and who did not request reappointment within 12 months was, in effect, off the rolls. He may have gone to find Eliza. The last postal order from McGee at Carson City to E. Carpenter at the Westin Hotel in Sacramento is dated, as I said, September of 1874. It is reasonable to think that something happened in September of 1874 that ended the arrangement. Eliza may have moved on from the Westin. She may have died at the Westin. She may have come back to Genoa. I have no record of any of these things. The Sacramento Bee for September and October of 1874 has been searched by me, page by page, on microfilm, 3 separate times. There is no notice of an Eliza Carpenter. He was, or rather, by then, he had been off the rolls, a man with a wagon and a Voigtländer lens, and a wife who had left. And after September of 1874, the trail goes cold for almost 10 years. It picks up again, faintly, in a place I had not expected to look. In 1883, the Wairika Journal in Siskiyou County, in the far north of California, carried, on the 7th of June of that year, an obituary notice of 41 words for a man identified as J. Carpenter, photographer, late of Wairika, of consumption, aged 42 years. There is no other information. The Wairika cemetery records of the early 1882 are incomplete. An office fire some years later took most of the books for that decade. The Siskiyou County Clerk's office holds a single document from the estate, a sale of camera equipment to a Wairika studio called the McCleary Brothers for $38. The list of equipment includes one brass-bound camera, one Voigtländer lens, one portable darkroom tent, 6 unexposed glass plates, and a leather-bound folder containing one cabinet card of a mining concern, marked Virginia City, 1873. The Wairika Journal obituary does not name a wife. The estate sale does not list a wife as recipient of any proceeds. The $38 went, by the estate notice, to the parish poor box at the Methodist Episcopal Church at Wairika, by request of the deceased. I am not certain the J. Carpenter at Wairika in 1883 is Jonathan Carpenter of the Carson Valley Circuit. The age is right. Jonathan was 23 in 1869 and would have been 37 in 1883, not 42, and consumption was the standard frontier euphemism for any wasting illness that the local doctor could not diagnose more precisely. But the camera and lens and tent and the cabinet card marked Virginia City 1873 are not coincidence. He, or someone close to him, ended up at Wairika, and the lens and the print ended at the McCleary Brothers studio, and the folder containing the print eventually came back to the Nevada Historical Society at Reno in 1962 by gift of a descendant of the McCleary family. The provenance in the Society's catalog card lists the gift, the donor's name, and the original studio mark. The leather folder did not survive the move. It is on this point, the survival of the print, that I want to spend the last minutes of this lecture. The yellow-jacketed cabinet card survived because Carpenter put it in a leather folder, and because the leather folder went to the McCleary Brothers studio at Wairika in 1883, and stayed in the back room of that studio for nearly 80 years. The studio closed in 1948. The contents were sold to a private collector at Eureka. The collector died in 1961. The estate went to a granddaughter who lived in Reno and who in 1962 gave the folder and the leather pouches it contained to the Nevada Historical Society. None of the people who handled the folder from 1883 to 1962 knew what was inside the buff board. None of them knew the print carried a thin sheet of writing paper folded twice. None of them knew the name Eliza. The cabinet card lived for a century and a quarter as a working print. It is now, by the careful protocol of the Society's Conservation Department, a different sort of object. It is in an acid-free folder, in a temperature-controlled vault, and it is brought out only on specific written applications.